Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 4 now of the Memorial Memo KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast. Katie, there's a big game last night. We have another one coming up. A lot to get into per usual. But of course, I like to always ask just to kind of get things started. How are you today?
I'm feeling good. Put up some Christmas decorations today, so I'm definitely getting in the spirit. And coming off a Kentucky win is always really fun. But yeah, the game was awesome. How'd you feel?
I felt pretty good about it, and we're about to get into that in a minute. But first, Katie, there's some recruiting stuff we got to talk about just to get it kind of out of the way. We kind of have three unfortunate things kind of happen. So Zakiya Johnson commits to LSU. We kind of heard throughout this last week that was kind of what was to be expected. LSU, they have the best NIL situation in the country. It's no shock that they pretty much bought Zakiya to come down there over Kentucky and Louisville. But Katie, it's just a little bit disappointing that she didn't stay really with either of these in-state schools.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing. But again, we have to think. Last week we talked about how we're not really worried that Kenny doesn't have any recruits yet. Like we said, season just started, so hopefully we can get some of those more high-profile recruits in the coming weeks after Kentucky starts winning some games. So.
Right, and of course, being, I guess, I don't know if unbiased is the way to put it, but just me talking. I hope she kills it down there. I hope she goes down there, and I hope LSU. I hope they win every game besides the one they play Kentucky. Right? I hope LSU and Zakiya, I hope they succeed. Maddie Parrish committed to West Virginia. This doesn't really come as much as a shock to me because I was told that she was really deciding, kind of towards the end of her recruitment, she was deciding between West Virginia and Purdue. And, of course, she's a Mountaineer now. So, Katie, that doesn't surprise me much either.
Right, and I feel like kind of in the beginning, West Virginia was a little bit of a dark horse. Like, you don't really hear about a lot of high-ranked commits going to WVU, but again, like, I hope that she does well there. Of course, Kentucky's never going to have to play WVU, but where I'm from, if you're a WVU fan, that's definitely not a good thing. But yeah, I hope that she does well there.
Right, and then, of course, there's Manuela Fernandez, who committed to Illinois. Now, there's a reason if you're like, Phoenix, who in the world is Manuela Fernandez? Well, we offered her earlier, kind of when Kenny first got here. And I think after he put the roster together, I think he quickly realized, okay, maybe we don't need her as much. So I don't, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, I don't think she was even on campus for a visit ever. So, Katie, I think this one was really just kind of an offer, and I don't think Kentucky pursued her much harder after that.
Yeah, if you're not going to pursue a player, then obviously they're not going to pick you. I think that, of course, makes good decisions for what's good for her career. And obviously, Kenny and the rest of the staff felt like she wasn't really one of those they had to push for very hard. So hopefully she does well wherever she's going.
And, of course, then you have, kind of to round out the 25 class, you have Agot McKeer and Kaylin Carroll, who are still available. Agot McKeer is a top 5, top 10 prospect. Kaylin Carroll's top 20 prospect. McKeer is going to decide. I know I said any day now last time, but it's any day now. I'm pretty sure it's pretty well known, or at least that's what has been put out there, that she's wanting to wanting to commit before the early signing period. So, I think really any day now she could commit. And then Kaylin Carroll, I have not heard anything as far as she's probably going here, she's probably going there. So I can't say Kentucky's the favorite, but I also can't say Kentucky's out of it.
Yeah, and of course, you just never know. It could come out as a shock if she does pick Kentucky because, of course, we're not hearing anything from, the inside staff, But, again, wherever they choose, it's going to be what's best for them. So, hopefully they come to Kentucky, but if they don't, then we just have to wish them the best.
Now, Kate, what I'm really excited for is in the 26th class, Madden Greenway narrowed her list down to 6. That list consists of UCLA, Stanford, Iowa, Kentucky, Duke, and Clemson. Now, Katie, I think there are there's obviously very strong signs for her to go to Iowa because that's where her dad played football there. She's an Iowa legacy child. But Katie, you can go look. She's only following Kentucky on Instagram of those programs. it's not just Instagram, but the way she talks about Kenny, the way she talks about Kentucky, there's pretty good signs for Kentucky too. Me personally, I'm not going to do a crystal ball yet because I think we're a little too far from her recruitment or from her commitment. But Katie, I personally feel like it's going to be Iowa or Kentucky here.
Yeah, I think having Kentucky on that list, especially narrowed down to Final Six, is very promising. Of course, Iowa, created Caitlin Clark, so it's very like, why would she not want to go and be the next Caitlin Clark or whatever?
Exactly.
But just having Kentucky on that list based off of one singular game, I think is such a good sign. So we'll definitely be seeing that soon, I think.
And you talks about wanting to be the next Caitlin Clark. Well, Katie, she's pretty high on Georgia Amoore too. She's kind of undersized like Georgia. I think Georgia's 5'6", and I think Madden is 5'8". So she's a little bit taller, but still kind of undersized. And I think she sees how Kenny, how much time he puts into her, how much he values her, and even if you're not thick in the weeds of the recruiting scoop and everything, Katie, I feel like it has to be pretty appealing to be like, oh, Kenny really loves his point guards. That could be something I want to go maybe play for him.
Yeah, and Georgia has stuck around for the past 5 seasons, so obviously Kenny is doing something right with her. We've seen she's a great player, she's a selfless player, and so, maybe Madden just loves the idea of having a coach that truly puts the time and effort in instead of wanting to create a player that is just the star of the team and maybe becoming a player that can be a facilitator and be a true leader, but not be the only star best player on the team.
Right. And now, Katie, I think we've done plenty of talking about future teams. I want to talk about this one because we just had a game yesterday. Kentucky wins 98-43, 55-point win. I thought we were talking like 40, 50, 55-point win, Katie. Now, you played this over-under game with me, if you remember, on our last episode. And I'm going to take the time to brag on myself because I feel like I deserve it. So, if you can recall, you asked me if Kentucky would score over or under 82 points. 98 is a little bit over 82 points, and that's what I said.
Yeah, definitely.
I said Kentucky would have over 1,400, I think it was 1,400-ish fans in attendance. Now, it was only like halfway full, but I still take that. That's still like 3,000, so over. I said the highest score would be Claire Streck. She had 22. Over. She had over 19 points, and of course, I think last season it was Aja Petty who had 19, so I got the over on that too. South Carolina Upstate's highest score last season was 18 points. I said we'd have the under on that. I don't think they had a player in double digits yesterday.
No, they didn't.
Kentucky shot over 48% from the field, and Kentucky shot, thank goodness, over 11% from three-point land. And, of course, last but not least, Kentucky, last season, Sanaya Tyler played the most minutes against USC Upstate with 31. Amelia Hassett and Georgia Amoore both had 30 last night. So, I didn't miss one there. Kate, I'm pretty proud of myself, but, just kind of hearing those numbers, right, hearing all of that, what was your biggest takeaway from last night's game?
Well, first of all, interestingly enough, even though Sanaya played the most minutes last year, she actually played the least minutes in this game. She only played 5. And, of course, we don't know what the reasoning behind that is. We didn't really even get to see her. She only played 5 minutes, so we didn't even get to see what the reason why was. If she was, not playing very well, maybe she's taking it easy. Maybe there's some kind of injury or something that we don't really know about yet. But, just looking at those numbers, I think is so, so impressive because USC Upstate is not a bad team. They're obviously not at the same caliber that Kentucky's at, and their coach knew that. They actually were probably the only team to agree to play the new Kentucky rather than the old Kentucky because they knew the challenge that it would be. And so I respect USC Upstate for coming into this game knowing that it was just going to be a learning experience for them. Having such a big team like Kentucky, I think it's really hard to prepare your players to go into a game where they're severely undersized. But looking at our numbers specifically, I'm really impressed with 35 of 67 from the field. which I think is 50. It's 52.2%.
Yeah.
I think shooting over half from the field is great. I mean,
Yeah.
you're making most of your shots. I think that that's awesome. Of course, we saw a lot of Clara Strack and Clara Silva turnaround fadeaways in the paint, and I think the majority of Kentucky's points did come from the paint, probably because the lack of size from USC Upstate. So when we get further into the season with bigger teams, we'll definitely see a lot of that. Clara kicking the ball out to the wing and someone shooting a three. Again, we're going to have to work a little bit on the 3-point shooting, but I think that for it being the first game, I thought we looked pretty solid offensively.
Right. And Katie, my first big take, we have a few takeaways obviously to bounce off of, but I think my first big one, I actually really liked the attendance last night. Of course, Kentucky plays at 5, the men play at 7, and it's two new coaches starting their respective eras. People are gonna have to choose it in between those. And Katie, 3,000-ish fans. I said around 60% full, so maybe 3,000, 3,500 fans. Katie, I was actually really encouraged to see that.
Yeah, I was too. I mean, we talked a lot last week about having this double header and maybe being able to go to both games. I think that it's really encouraging because, of course, men's basketball tickets are more expensive than women's tickets. So hopefully, a lot of people were able to do that double header type of deal. But I think with season tickets being sold out, and even though the lower bowl wasn't completely full, I feel like when we have games coming up where maybe there isn't a men's game that same night, there will definitely be, I would say, 4,500, like close to 5,000 people there consistently.
Yeah.
It was also Monday, so you don't really know if a lot of people are going to show up on a Monday night. But yeah, I mean, for it being a 5 p.m. game, people just getting off work, I think that it was like a great crowd.
Exactly. Yeah. I think what we do know is that there's going to be some sellouts this year. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
and plus it's USC Upstate. It's not Louisville or a big team, right? Like there's gonna be times this year when that building's gonna be sold out and it's gonna be rocking, and I think it's gonna be awesome. Katie,
Mm-hmm.
the starting lineup last night: Georgia Amoore, Deja Lawrence, Amelia Hassett, Tiani Key, Claire Strack.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think that is the normal starting five moving forward, barring any injuries, obviously?
I think I'm going to have to go with yes. I think that Amore and Strack are basically shoo-ins for the starting lineup from here on out. But again, I think that it is going to be the one that we see the most. Of course, we saw a lot of different lineups throughout the game, but those were the
Yeah.
5 that had the most minutes. So I think that is reflecting something that Kenny is seeing in practice, obviously. If they're your 5 best players, you're going to want to play them the most.
Right. And I think when we originally were trying to think of what we thought the starting lineup would be, I think you said Clara Silva at the 5.
Mhm.
I said Lexi Blue at the 3. And of course, those are obviously two freshmen, and there's no freshmen in this starting lineup. And obviously, it's very clear Kenny wants experienced people starting. But even then, Silva was the 6th man off the bench.
Mhm.
First person to check in, I believe, after that first timeout. Cassidy Rowe, someone else that came off the bench. I was kind of really expecting her to just kind of be a backup point guard behind Georgia. But Katie, it looks like she's going to play the 2 kind of alongside her, and I think that's kind of shown how much better she's gotten as a shooter, but 2 as just an offensive weapon in general.
And last night we talked a lot about her confidence and the way that she has grown from, sophomore to junior year. Even though she only scored 2 points, 1 of 1 from the field. So obviously she's not gonna. At least last night, she wasn't the offensive weapon that she might want to be scoring wise. But I think that she moved the ball really well. She's aggressive on defense. And again, her confidence has just skyrocketed, and I think that that's so amazing to see from her.
Right. And I know we touched on it a second ago, but for me, maybe the performance maybe I don't know if most impressed is the right word because I did expect a big night from her. But Katie, I was really happy with what we saw from Claire Strack.
Mhm.
She comes out, she has a great game. Just looking at the numbers, she scored 22 points on 7 of 11 shooting. 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals. So she's filling up the stat sheet. She's really just going out there and executing. And I think she's only going to get better, right? Because she's a sophomore. But even then, she didn't play a ton as a freshman either.
Mm-hmm.
So she's only going to get better. She's only going to improve. And Katie, but by the time March gets around, I think Clara Strack can be, I don't know what you would call it necessarily, but I think she could be someone who's really underrated in this conference.
Yeah, and I think her 7 of 11 from the field is being a little bit deflated by 0 of 3 from the perimeter. It's nice to see that she's not scared to shoot those shots, but it's also really nice to see that, she went 7 of 8 from the paint. I think that she is definitely going to be the one that, people look for down low, especially when we see her and Silva playing together. That's just 2 players that you can't hardly stop. I mean, Clara Strack had this crazy assist. I remember it was Cassidy Rowe, no-look pass to Silva. Silva passes down to Strack, or Strack passes to Silva. So it was Rowe to Strack to Silva. And
Okay.
it was just like the most beautiful sequence of events. And of course, Silva makes the shot. But yeah, I think that both of them, or all 3 of them, are going to be such great offensive weapons. And I think that that is so promising for the team in the future.
Can we just talk about Clara Silva for a second? I mean, Katie, is she not like the greatest person ever? She scores 14 points, 6 of 6 from the field, 2 of 2 from the free throw line. She has 7 rebounds and 6 blocks. I don't know what, all respect to USC Upstate. What in the world are you doing in your game plan with your 6'1" forward trying to score on 6'7" Clara Silva? That doesn't make sense to me. But Katie, outside of the numbers, just me, I like to. I may be weird, I try to look for some of the really small things when they're playing. She just smiles the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
She is a bundle of joy, and I really appreciate that because she's grateful to be here. And Katie, at the same time, she's killing it.
I know, and we got the chance to talk to her a few weeks ago, and you wouldn't even guess by talking to her because she's so quiet, she's so reserved, and she's very humble, and you can tell. And for her to go out and have a performance like she did, I mean, perfect from the field, you would never guess it. If you saw her on the street and maybe didn't realize that she was 6'7" and you had a little conversation with her, you probably wouldn't guess that she's as good at basketball as she is. And so
True.
I'm really excited to see more from her.
Now, Katie, there's a reason why I'm not the head coach. It's because I was sitting here trying to think, oh boy, Amelia Hassett and Tiani Key are going to have to compete for minutes at the 4. What do we, what's going on? Why don't you just start them both? Do what Kenny did, start them both. But they both came out and had great performances. They each had 14 points apiece. Just looking at Amelia Hassett, she went 4 of 7 from the 3-point line. Katie, I'm not expecting her to keep up that clip, but that was really encouraging. She had 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals, along with a block. So Amelia Hassett, it's going to be interesting to see how she does come the new year when she has to play against SEC teams, more talented, bigger, stronger teams. But Katie, in this tune-up game here against USC Upstate, I was really proud of her. And then Tiani Key, right? I think you pointed out to me after the game that you were really impressed with her. 14 points, 6 of 11 from the field. I really like, outside of Strack, Key is the one who put up the most shots. She shot 11 shots. They both shot 11, actually. I'm really happy to see her shot volume. She had 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 blocks. I mean, Katie, there is a reason that she was a top 10 recruit. I think we're seeing it. But between Hassett and Key, I think they both brought a lot last night, and I really can't wait to see them continue to do so.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like for both of them being forwards, but they're smaller forwards, I think it can be easy to kind of be shadowed by Clara Strack and Clara Silva just because they are so tall. They're unlike anything Kentucky has ever seen before. So I think that Tiani and Amelia really made their mark. People are going to notice them. People are going to pay attention to them. And I think that, they did such a great job defensively, offensively. Just seeing Amelia with the 2 steals. She wasn't the only one with 2 steals. Clara Strack had 2, and Lexi Blue also had 2. Just a really aggressive defense from everybody, and I think that really goes to show that Kenny's style of play isn't just offensively focused. He really is making a defensive effort here, and yeah, I mean, those 2 are just 2 that I'm really excited to see on both sides of the court from now on.
And you know what I think's really amazing, Katie, is that we have somehow gotten this far. We've gotten 20 and a half minutes into our episode, and we haven't talked about Georgia Amoore, or at least not a whole lot. Georgia had a double-double we're talking about, 11 points, 10 assists. She also had 6 rebounds on the night. Katie, she played 30 minutes. She comes out and she has a great game, just, All-American, All-SEC preseason, first team. She comes out and she does what she needs to do. The 10 assists is really awesome to see. I kind of said in the offseason, I think at Georgia Tech last season, or Virginia Tech, she averaged 6.8 assists per game. I wouldn't be surprised to see that number somewhere between 7 and 8 this year, because Kentucky's got a lot of shooters, a lot of scoring around her. And, I originally thought that Georgia, because last season Georgia scored 18.8 points per game. Don't quote me on that completely. But she scored somewhere around 18 points a game. That may go down to like 14, 15. Maybe she'll be able to keep it up. But Katie, I don't think she has to score a ton, because for one, if she's, dishing the ball and getting those assists, that's great. But there's just so much volume around this team. But Katie, how about Kentucky's All-American point guard?
I mean, yeah, like you mentioned the points, and in the press conference, Kenny talked about how her point average for the first 8 to 10 games is going to be lower than what we're used to, because she's learning how to facilitate shots in a real game scenario. And I think that because of that, she's giving her teammates confidence, and she's also showing them like, hey, you can score 98 points without me. Like, truthfully, Georgia Amoore might not have to score points in any game, and her teammates will still be able to pick up the slack, because she's so good at finding the open player. And I think that is something that we needed at Kentucky, was someone who's able to facilitate those shots. Because if you remember, I mean, we had Maddie Shear. She was our point guard. She did a great job. She had some upper 20-point games time to time, but she didn't really have players to look to besides Asia Petty to really score points. I mean, truthfully. And so I feel like it must be so encouraging for Georgia to be able to have confidence in her teammates and know, okay, well, I'm going to go throw it to Claire Strack and she's going to put up a layup and it's going to go in. Or I'm going to pass it to Amelia Hassan. She's going to shoot a 3 and she'll probably make it. And just having that kind of confidence in her teammates, I think, is something that we were really looking for.
Right. And it's just such a fun style of play, man. Like Kentucky, there were 5 players in double figures and they scored 28 points off the bench. It's so fun to see just how for how fun the style of play is too, but Katie, just how, what's the word I'm looking for? Just how well they execute the Kenny system, right? And the thing is, we're 1 game into the season. It's early. Just wait until after the new year and wait until March when everyone is kind of playing at their peak. Katie, I think there's a lot to be excited about there. But now, my favorite thing about last night's game, Katie, with 1 minute and 29 seconds left to go, of course, you have, you have your bench in, right? Because you're up by 50. And Gabby Brooks is in the game. And, she shoots a couple shots. She doesn't get any to fall. You kind of hear the, whenever she misses. But Katie, with 1 minute 29 left, she makes 3. And the bench explodes. The bench erupts in the loudest cheer maybe ever. And I just look at Kenny, and he's not cheering. He's not doing anything. He's just smiling. And I thought that was so cool. And Kenny talked about it post game. He was like, the kind of the stigma with a lot of coaches' kids is that they're just there because of the coach. They're not ready. They're not this. They're not that. And he said it. Like last year, Gabby wasn't, at Virginia Tech. They had to redshirt her. But Katie, she comes into practice. She works her tail off. It paid off last night. And I just thought it was a really cool moment to watch Gabby hit that three and then to see Kenny, kind of inside and outside of basketball, just how much Kenny has had to go through, over the course of these last several months to finally have that moment where he can just smile and be thankful. And, it was a really beautiful bow to put on the game.
Yeah, and I think that based off everything we've seen in the offseason, he did a really, really good job of separating his dad life from his coach life. But I truly think in that moment he had to have been the proudest dad in the world. Just because, Could you imagine coaching your daughter for your entire life and she makes one of her first 3-point shots at a D1 school at Kentucky nonetheless, where her dad is the head coach? It's just like a perfect storyline. I mean, you took advantage of that. And it's like, I mean, I was smiling. You were smiling. Everyone was so happy for her. And granted, it's one shot. But like you said, she redshirted last year. She wasn't ready. And this year she got her time to shine. And hopefully we get to see more of that. Of course, if she's not going to be, fully ready for other games, I think that game was a good indicator that she will go in and she'll shoot. I mean, she was 1 of 4. So she'll shoot when she's open. She's confident in her playing. And I don't know. I just think that's really promising to even have that from your bench players, especially from her.
Right. It's just, I just thought it was so great, because again, and we don't, it's his personal life, so we won't get too far into it, but just kind of in his, there's been a lot he's had to do with in these last several months, and I just thought it was super cool. Before we move on to Northern Kentucky, Katie, who was your game MVP? For me, I'd have to say Clara Strack, just because she was the leading scorer. I kind of thought she'd have the big game. She came out and did it. But Katie, to you, who was your MVP of last game and why?
I think I could say Clara Strack, but I think I am going to go with Tiani Key just because I feel like we saw a lot of really good things from her. Good efficiency. She shot the ball a lot. She's very confident in her shot. And, she filled up the stats board all across the way. She had rebounds, assists. She had a block. She had 3 blocks. She had a steal. She filled up every single stat that you could fill. And I think that's why I have to pick her.
Right. Now, as I just said, we're going to move on to Northern Kentucky. Team Kentucky plays, of course, you can see on our screen or you hear me say it, November 7th at historic Memorial Coliseum. And I believe it's actually at 6 o'clock. They may have moved it. I think it was at 7 and they moved it at 6. Anyway, moving on from that. Now, Katie, the Northern Kentucky Norse, because what in the world is a Norse? They lost to Middle Tennessee State 79-58 yesterday at home. Now, I know that's, if you're just listening, I know that sounds bad. I know that sounds like, oh boy, they lost to Middle Tennessee State by 21. But it's Middle Tennessee State beat Louisville in the NCAA tournament last year. They should be a tournament team again this year. They should be probably borderline top 10 seed, right? Now, it'll be interesting to see how Middle Tennessee does the rest of the season. But as for Northern Kentucky, they're projected 7th in the Horizon League preseason poll. And they've got 3 really good players, one of which is Macy Blevins, who is projected to be she was preseason second team All-Horizon League. And they have 2 players who did pretty good against Middle Tennessee, and Haley, and I'm really, really bad with these names, right? So allow me to apologize ahead of time. Haley, or it may not be Haley, maybe like Holly, Idowu, Idowwu, Idowu. Anyway, moving on. 18 points, 7 of 9 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3-point land. And then Gabby Rosano, she had 11 points on 3 of 5 3-point shooting. So kind of just reading those 2 stat lines, Katie, I think Northern Kentucky is going to – I don't know they're going to have to kind of adjust their game plan a little bit because they'll lose by 50 if they try to beat Kentucky at their own game necessarily. But this is a team that's going to come out and want to kind of kill you from the 3.
Yeah, I mean, they're about the same size that USC Upstate was. They have a couple players over 6 foot, but everyone else is below. And so definitely going to have to adjust a game plan. You can't compete in the paint when you're against Strack and Silva. And even at that point, when you're against Key and Hassett and other players who are taller than you, it's harder to compete unless you have the right angle under the basket. So I think we will be seeing a lot of kicking it out to the corner, shooting threes type deal. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think this game is it obviously Kentucky should win, but I think that it'll be closer than last night's game. And I think that the 3-point shooting on NKU's side will be more elevated than anything. But Kentucky will obviously probably be throwing it into the paint and running that again just because they can and they know that that is probably what they need to do to beat NKU.
Right. And this is it's pretty, I feel like this would be a pretty good look at where the defense really is because USC Upstate wasn't great at shooting. I think this Northern Kentucky team's going to be a lot better at shooting the three. You know, I think obviously look at our perimeter defense and it has some work to be done to where, players want to drive by and get to the rim. But I imagine Northern Kentucky, hopefully, or maybe not, I don't know. But I would imagine they're smarter than, trying to score on Claire Silva and Claire Streck down in the paint. But, I mean, of course, if you can get the open layup, then whatever. But I would imagine, if they're going to keep up with Kentucky and beat Kentucky, they're going to try to score and make it rain from the three. So it'll be interesting to see how Kentucky does there. Now, Katie, I know we haven't even played this Northern Kentucky game, but by the next time we record, we're going to have played another game. We're going to have to go against Wofford, right? The old Wofford, what's a Wofford mascot? Is this a bulldog? Terrier. Wofford Terriers. Okay. So, Katie, in their last game, they beat yesterday. Now, this is a school, I just want everyone to know, this is a school with no logo, according to at least Google, okay? Then it says Newberry Wolves. Now, Katie, I don't know a lot about Newberry Wolves, but they beat them 76-27. So I would hope you beat a school with no logo by 50. That's just me. In that game, Wofford, let's see, they won, of course, 76-27. Their highest scorer, though, they only had 2 players in double digits. One would be Maddie Heiss, who had 11 points, and then you have Libby Privet, who had 10 points. So it'll be interesting to see where how Wofford looks against Kentucky on is that Tuesday? Yes, on Tuesday. So that'll be interesting to look at. But this is also a good Wofford team. I want to say, I know they beat Newberry. Who in the world are you? But they beat them pretty good. But they're also projected first in the what is this? This SoCon? Yeah, in the SoCon. I'm looking it up. If you can't tell, I'm looking at it. Go. They're projected first in the Southern Conference. They received 7 of the 8 first place votes. So that'll be another good test for Kentucky too.
Yeah, and I think something interesting to note is Libby Privet sat out for the past 2 seasons because she was injured. And I'm also looking at their game recap, but she went 2 for 2 on shooting. She scored 10 points, 2 for 2 from 3, added 4 free throws. So she's obviously going to be the 3-point shooter. I believe she's 5'5", 5'6". I don't think that she's very tall either. So that might be, who you put Cassidy Rowe on. If you're going to play Cassidy Rowe, you want a defender that's going to be all up in their face. And I think that she's done a great job with perimeter defense. Or maybe you just go ahead and put Georgia Amoore on her and see how it goes. But again, I think that this is a good Wofford team, but Kentucky obviously should come out with the win. Of course, we will see on Tuesday.
Right, and I think that, these next two games, both Northern Kentucky and Wofford, I think the player who I'm going to be looking at the most is Deja Lawrence. Because you should be able to score against these two teams. I think she only had 9 points last night. I don't think there's anything really good or bad about that. She scored 9 points, but I want to see how her defense is, against these two teams who you are more talented than. Can you guard the perimeter? Will you not be a defensive liability? Mm-hmm. And I would expect Deja to be able to hold her own. But Katie, for me to be encouraged heading into SEC play, Deja Lawrence is going to have to do her thing and make sure she can at least play, solid defense against Wofford and Northern Kentucky.
I mean, yeah, definitely. And of course, turnovers weren't an issue last night. Kentucky had 9, but these are a couple of games where you're definitely going to have to take care of the ball because these two teams are better 3-point shooters on paper than USC Upstate was. So taking care of the ball is going to be really important, and also just that perimeter defense is going to be something I think that Kenny will probably be focusing on in practice tomorrow. And of course, that's their only practice before they play on Thursday. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't really know what else you would focus on besides your offensive scheme, but of course, perimeter defense is important.
Okay, we talked about our game MVP for the USC Upstate game, and we kind of cheated because we did it afterwards. So we're going to not cheat this time and do it before. So, Katie, your game MVP for the Northern Kentucky game.
I think I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say Amelia Hassett. I think we'll see a pretty high 3-point scoring game from her, and hopefully a really good defensive game as well.
And I'm going to go not really on a limb at all. I'm going to say Georgia Amoore. It would be the MVP of the Northern Kentucky game. And of course, since we're here and we're talking about it, what's your MVP for the Wofford game?
I think I'm going to have to go Georgia Amoore.
Okay. And honestly, I don't really have a whole, it's so hard doing, just the way scheduling is, it's hard to do this, but if I'm going to have Georgia be the MVP of Northern Kentucky, I won't have her go back to back.
Yep.
So for Wofford, I'm going to go with, I'm going to go with Tiani Key. I think she kind of continues the stretch that she had. I think she has a great game. I think she has a great against Northern Kentucky, but I think she has a really good game against Wofford. And Katie, that, by the next time we record, Kentucky should be 3-0. And of course, after that Wofford game, the big scary Louisville Cardinals, who, they held their own against UCLA out in France. It's going to be really interesting to see how Kentucky does then. But that's a few games down the road. We have Thursday to worry about against the Northern Kentucky Norse. Katie, before we get out of here, do you have anything to say?
No, I don't. I'm really impressed with the way that we played. Hopefully, we got the Georgia Amoore double-double. I have a feeling we'll be seeing a Clara Strack double-double and probably a Tiani Key double-double. So I think that she had 9 rebounds last night, so she got pretty close. But I think that definitely we'll be seeing a lot of really good efficiency across the board for these next 2 games. So I'm really excited for those.
Right, and I'm just, I think for me, the big thing is I just need to see Kentucky come out and execute. I need them to do what they did last night. Come out, win by 30, and Wofford's actually a lot better. Win handily these next 2 games so that we go into that Louisville game riding high and we're ready to put Jeff Walls and Louisville Cardinals on upset alert. I'm Phoenix Stevens. This is Katie Hutchison. Thank you all for tuning in to episode 4 now of the Memorial Memo. I feel like time is flying by. We will see you all this time next week. Thank you for tuning in.